Are you aware of what city in North America is the most non-religious? The city in North America, of the big cities, that is the most non-religious. This past week, an article appeared in the Vancouver Sun. Quote, Metro Vancouver tops list of non-religious big cities in North America. Metro Vancouver, top cities, non-religious in all of North America. It's a lot of people. I mean, a lot of cities throughout North America, and if you have not read this article, I encourage you to do so. I'll actually link it this afternoon when I post the YouTube sermon. It's well worth reading and really should serve as something of a kick in the pants for us. Make us wake up to the need we have to respond to what is going on all around us. One of the fruits of a society that is non-religious is a different meaning of life and what, if anything, is beyond the grave. It's inevitable. What, if anything, is beyond the grave? Even if people do not go around talking about this, and they do in the almost unconscious kind of ways, as when some celebrity dies or somebody perhaps in one circle dies, they say, well, what are you going to do for your funeral? And so it comes up in conversations, even though it's not intentional. That being said, many people actually, whether that happens or not, actually answer these questions by the way they live their life, and you and me, how we live our life every day, the decisions we make every day. They're answering this question whether we like it or not. What is our view, if anything, about life beyond the grave? We see this played out in the first reading that I'm going to focus on, wherein this pagan king, Antiochus, threatens this family with torture if they would not deny the faith and adopt his pagan ways. Their view of the meaning of life is not only of this world, but beyond the world, beyond the grave, and it will determine how they respond to the king's threats. And let's be clear, they are threats. I do not think it is an accident that Canada has this distinction of being one of the top countries in the world for euthanasia. Came out in the news several months ago. And that within Canada, British Columbia is one of the top provinces for MAID. Maybe Quebec is higher, can't remember, but we are certainly close, if not higher than Quebec. People who do not believe in any afterlife, one that is worth looking forward to, can be more easily manipulated by the powers that be, or to a legalization of something that occurs, making it very easy to have your life ended. The amount of people not only succumbing to MAID, but even actively petitioning for it to occur is for many reasons. And it's important that we are aware of them and acknowledge them, some of which are rooted in the idea that there is nothing beyond the grave. And if one actually adopts that seriously, and it tends to be adopted by the way we live our life, then we can very easily see the world as a kind of big supermarket from which we have to get as much out of as we can before it's done, before our time is done, before we have to check out. Or if there is something, then it's okay to hasten one's journey there by killing oneself. I'm not talking about those who succumb to suicide because they are subject to depression and they've lost control of reason. That's not what I'm talking about. MAID involves an intentional decision. It has to be intentioned and shown to be intentioned, at least at this point. This is a dangerous, slippery slope that the authorities tend to deny, but always bears out in reality. Or it could be giving way to the temptation that life is not worth living anymore because of pain. And pain is an awful thing. I don't like pain. I'm sure if nobody here likes pain, like real bona fide pain. Many types of pain, we don't even know what it's like until we are subject to it, or we see somebody we love dearly going through it or experiencing it. It's terrible. Or feeling worthless or lonely. These are real concrete realities that all of us are challenged with, and we need to respond to, because whether we do it intentionally or not, we're kind of responding to it by the way we make our decisions, the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis. A conversation I had with a good friend of mine who I've talked about before, Father John Horgan, really kind of caught my attention, stuck with me, and it came to the surface when I was reflecting on these readings. He said after he had received his full prognosis or diagnosis of stomach cancer, which is like, if you have stomach cancer, basically it's you say your prayers and you write your will. It's one of the more deadly kinds of cancer. So he received the full diagnosis and his chemo treatment program. And he was being driven home, and we chatted, and he said, "You know, BJ, even though I don't agree with this, I can understand how, if you didn't have solid faith, how you could give in to MAID. Because of the feeling, and you perhaps have experienced this with a loved one, the feeling of isolation, even though it may be lessened by people around you, you still feel isolated, like I am going to die. And I know that intellectually right now, but I have no clue how I will experience that when my time comes. I can only try to prepare for it." So he said, don't worry, I do believe in eternal life, but I can understand, because he was experiencing that isolation, and there was a natural fear there as well. Even Jesus experienced it in his human nature. He did spend his days preparing for the eternal life that he believed in, and died what I believe to be a very holy death. I pray that God will help me to die the same way he did. This is a Christian response to a view of life that includes not only this world, because he did have a legitimate and wholesome love for this world, but in relationship to the world to come. It was always related to the world to come. God teaches us something, a view of life, something that is different about life here in this world and eternal life, from the one that is so prevalent in a non-religious society. The first reading of the day shows the strength and resilience that faith in eternal life can give to us. The family is pressured by this evil king, and he was one nasty dude, Antiochus. He's a tyrant. He's demanding they deny their faith and just kind of go along with the crowd. These Jews were being forced to give up and deny the law of Moses, which for them were kind of inextricably bound up with who they were. It was like their self-identity. And eat pork. You and I say, well, what's the big deal? You might be just, basically just do it and get along. If they did this, though, we all need to think, if we did this, gave into these demands, then they will be forced to ask themselves, is anything that I say or believe of any meaning or value? Because this tyrant makes me change what's core to me. Now, what the next one comes along and he forces or she forces me to do this, and then I have to change again and again and again. What, if anything, has meaning in my life? These people actually have beliefs, and they are under no illusion they're living in dangerous and tempting times. A lot of temptations around them, just like you and me today. It is faith in eternal life, real active and a truly engaged faith that helps them to live life to the fullest and resist denial of their faith at the same time. So they do live life to the full, and they resist this temptation to deny their faith. Faith that gives life meaning. Faith in eternal life helps them to endure persecution and sufferings. It does not help them escape in this particular case. Sometimes it does. It does not help them escape the suffering and the pain that is involved in being put to death in this way. But it does help them to get through it. If they give in to get along, then what core values do they have to kind of resist other behavior that is against their belief system? Think about a spouse who, when you marry a Catholic, is supposed to, as a qualification or a criteria to marry a Catholic in the church, agree that the Catholic will always raise their children in the Catholic faith and actually always be able to practice their faith. And then all of a sudden there's a change of tune after the marriage. There's no change of tune. Now, you married me on that condition, and it shouldn't actually even be a discussion now. But if it becomes a discussion, you know you've got a problem right away. It should be discussed beforehand. This is one of many hundreds of examples that some couples face. You don't wait till you're married to discuss this. You discuss this before. It is a condition. And it can be discussed in such a way that it's not like, with a sledgehammer. This is my core belief. So it's not a matter of discussion. I am going to Mass, and the children need to be raised Catholic type of thing. And hopefully it's said in such a loving way and, with healthy dialogue, but not dialogue that's meant to kind of deny one's faith, as a result of the outcome of a conversation. But dialogue in the sense that this is the person you are asking to marry. Is there still a desire to go forward type of thing? The faith this mother has is enormous, and it is something that is powerful, that the powerful of this world are always trying to destroy. And the reason is because people like this cannot be manipulated or coerced by temptations so easily or over a long period of time. And for this reason, they pose a threat to the powers that be. Our faith teaches us that there is life beyond the grave, and that life is personal union with God, with Jesus. It is often people of faith. There are many good-willed people, but they seem to be, with all the temptations around us, seem to be decreasing in numbers. But there are people of goodwill, but mostly people of faith in eternal life who oppose things like euthanasia, MAID, or abortion, or the transgender ideology, and the list goes on. Each of us is challenged by this mother speaking to us from many thousands of years ago to ask ourselves, do I believe in eternal life like she did? How do I live my life? Is it for this world only, or is it for eternal life? Do I make sacrifices, any sacrifices whatsoever? Do I make sacrifices intentionally to avoid sin? Not just for greater discipline or for more austerity or to prove that I have a strong will, but specifically out of love for Jesus Christ and my desire to be with him in eternal life. I make sacrifices for that purpose. Do I strive to die to myself so that I might be loyal and faithful to Jesus who died for me? The article I opened with reveals a population of Vancouver that is predominantly non-religious. There is an increasing pressure placed on Catholics and Christians to not only accept things like MAID and the other things I mentioned, but actually to embrace them. What do we have to respond to these ways of seeing the world? Because it is a clear worldview. Think about it. If this mother in today's reading did not have belief in eternal life, if she did not have this deep, strong conviction, she would have done everything and anything she could in her power to make sure her sons just said, I'll eat the pork, because Mom wants me to stay with them. In fact, she encouraged them to remain true and faithful to the end, and she knew exactly what that meant, and they did as well. Her faith led her to encourage them to be true and faithful to the end, not to deny faith in eternal life. Takeaway this week. We are in the month of November. The church encourages us to reflect on the last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. It's really, if you read Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, you know the second rule is begin with the end in mind. It's a business principle that maybe Stephen Covey, who was a Mormon, so he did probably read the Bible, got from the scriptures, because this is a basic principle that we're talking about here. Begin with the end in mind. We need to live our life every day with that relationship to eternal life, with the desire to meet Jesus when our life is over. So the takeaway this week is, do I live my life for this world only? Or do I live my life in relationship to eternal life? Do I live my life for this world only? Or do I live my life for eternal life?